Our next presentation brings two brothers together, once again, who, put it mildly, love a little bit of healthy competition. Bryan and Michael Voltaggio grew up together in Frederick, Maryland. They both heard the calling of the kitchens at an early age and followed their passions. Bryan Voltaggio attended the CIA, and then he worked for many years under the wing of Chef Charlie Palmer. He helmed several of Palmer's kitchens and then returned home to Frederick to open his temple to seasonal modern American cuisine, Volt, in 2008. Michael Voltaggio apprenticed under Master Chef Peter Timmons in the Greenbrier, and then went on to work at the Ritz-Carlton Naples, Dry Creek Kitchen, the Bazaar by Jose Andres, and until recently, the dining room at the Langham in Pasadena, California. Today, the brothers will present their different styles, techniques, and interpretations of a single featured ingredient, Australian Waigu beef, and individual iterations of tongue-in-cheek. And hopefully, the presentation won't end up like their first time working together on the line did, in a fist fight. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Bryan and Michael Voltaggio.
Just half of us.
You again?
I'm kidding.
Causing trouble?
I'm just kidding. He's on his way. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Want to start? Okay. So today, we're going to be working with Australian Wagyu beef, and we thought it'd be fun and kind of playful to do a dish called tongue and cheek. So Michael and my style are similar in some ways, but very different in others. You know, so this term kind of indicates sort of a definition of who we are together. You know, a little bit more playful, a little bit more aggressive, progressive. I'm a little bit more reserved and a little bit more resort to maybe classic technique. But both of us are very trained in classic technique, and we like to have fun with our food, and that's what we do. So Michael is going to be starting his interpretation of this sort of theme that we're going to be doing today, and it's going to start with the tongue.
Why do I have to go first?
Because you're number one.
So Antoinette called us and she said, you know, we've got an opportunity. We'd love to have the both of you do a demo. We'd like to see you take two similar ingredients and do two different interpretations of that ingredient. That ingredient being Wagyu beef, which is what Bryan just mentioned. I chose the tongue. I think it's a very underused cut of meat, if you could call it that. And then also, obviously, the whole play on words with Bryan and I sort of up here and the tongue-in-cheek thing, kind of taking a poke at each other and something. Basically, that term refers to something not necessarily as it seems. And we're going to kind of translate that message into our demo as well. So what I did with the tongue is, and this is actually Wagyu tongue, and what I was shocked when I ordered it, is that you can actually see marbling inside the tongue. So it's not like every other beef tongue, and you're thinking to yourself, well, it's just something that sits inside of a mouth and doesn't really do anything, and cows don't really talk, so it's not like a muscle that gets used. It is actually very marbled, this tongue. So what I did was I brined it for 24 hours. I made a solution of brown sugar, salt, water, added a lot of citrus, some spices, some coriander, some cinnamon, some allspice. Soaked the tongue in that brine for 24 hours after having soaked it in ice water for about 2 days, changing the ice water out every day or so. So you extract the blood out of the tongue, basically. Soak it in the brine. Then I vacuum packed it. I vacuum packed it in a fresh batch of the same brine, so it didn't have that raw blood and everything that was in it from the brining process. And basically vacuum packed it in a fresh batch of the brine, dropped it into a water bath, and cooked it at 70 degrees Celsius for about 24 hours. What you end up with is what I have here. We'll just take it out of the bag. And again, it was just 70 degrees Celsius for 24 hours. Tongue is cooked, and what I like to do is just remove that bottom, I don't even know what you call that part, underneath your tongue. I guess the part that sticks to your tongue to your mouth. I cut that part off. And as you can see already inside of the tongue, that this is actually kind of fatty and nice and marbled. Then the next thing we do is remove the taste buds off of it as well. So you can do that, and you can see the way we cooked it, it's very tender. You pretty much know the tongue is done when these taste buds sort of peel right off. After we did that, we took it, stuck it in the refrigerator, let it set back up, and my take on this dish is going to be a little more of a cold dish. I didn't bring anything with me to New York except for the actual tongue itself. I cooked some ahead of time, came out here, walked around some of the stands here, and grabbed some other ingredients so I could do something that was inspired by what I saw out here. Obviously, New York is the home of the pastrami sandwich. We all know that the best pastrami sandwiches are served right here in New York City. So what I did was I went out and bought some sauerkraut. We made a consomme out of that, and we made this sort of spaghetti out of the sauerkraut. The next flavor that we're introducing here is the Russian dressing, or the Thousand Island dressing, and I'll show you how we're going to do that in just a second. Brian, if you want to get started on your dish.
Okay.
I just have a quick question. I mean, there's Wagyu available all around the world now. Why did you select the Australian Wagyu?
I think it's the sustainability of it, A. B, the Japanese Wagyu is actually not really available anymore. They've had an issue with hoof and mouth disease. Last time that happened in the US, it took about 3 years to correct it, so we'd be allowed to import that beef again. There are some great producers of 100% Wagyu slowly starting to pop up here in the United States, and obviously we'll support those farmers as well. But this is really, in this case, was about availability, and the product is 100% Wagyu, so it's just a great piece of meat.
Yeah, it smells tremendous.
You want to try it?
Yeah.
So to start my second dish, or our second dish, I wanted to use the cheek, and I chose the cheek because I really like working with meats that are very rich on the palate. I mean, this Wagyu beef cheek is just, you can see the incredible marbling that's going through this. I also believe that braising, long and slow technique, is something that is very artistic. It's something that takes a little patience and time and effort, and one that can't be rushed. So you have to be patient. And actually, when we arrived on Monday, that's when I started cooking my cheeks. So I'm sorry, on Sunday when I arrived. So they've been cooking for that long, and we cook them low and slow. Same thing that Michael was doing. I was sort of inspired also by the flavors of pastrami and adding a little bit of smoke to it. So we did the same thing. So what I did was we put this on a very light cure, salt, also coriander, black pepper, fennel, really aromatic spices, and then seared the outside and then coated it with those spices and then started cooking it in the circulator. Just a little bit of butter, and that was it. And also a pinçage made with roasted caramelized carrots, celery, and onions. And I'm going to be finishing the dish with flavors of essentially mirepoix, all the same ingredients that were used in the cooking process. So very simple to clean these. It's important that you remove the outer sinew. And you'll find that this sinew runs on both sides of the cheek.
While Brian's cleaning that, he talked about the idea of pastrami. We basically, to get the pastrami spice into mine, since I didn't actually put pastrami spice or rub my meat with any, rub my meat. I said that in front of all of you. I actually made my pastrami spice on the side. So what I did was, again, went to the market, found some great whole grain mustard, sort of rinsed some of the pureed mustard that comes with the seeds off of it, and then just took the seeds that are actually inside of it, rinsed it. They've got a great texture. They're flavored with the mustard already. And then basically made a gastrique here. So it's glucose, sugar, a little bit of water, cooked it to about 218 degrees Fahrenheit. And then what we're going to do is just kind of suspend this stuff through it. So we'll have a gastrique that you can put on the plate, and all the flavors of the pastrami rub will be right there on the plate. So here we have 5 different kinds of peppers. You've got telecherry, Szechuan, long pepper, green peppercorns, pink peppercorns. We've got coriander in here. Basically all the things you'd find in a pastrami rub. We'll add this to the gastrique, along with our mustard seeds. And then just mix it, and everything will just be suspended, through the gastrique.
Did you add any kind of vinegar or anything to that?
I didn't add any vinegar to it. The acid is already from making the mustard. The vinegar is already in the mustard, so I just took the acid from there. Brian? We didn't rehearse this very well.
So after the cheek has been cooked, simply open up the bag, remove the excess liquid. You can see the outer layer of that caramelized vegetable and a little bit of jus that we place into the bag as we're braising. What you get is very tender cheek. It still has a little bit of redness in the center. And we're going to take this and we're actually going to smoke it too as well. So, using some apple wood and a smoking gun, I'm going to infuse the flavor of the smoke on the outer side of the cheek and sort of let that rest until we finish our other preparations. And this is such a neat tool. I'm sure everybody's familiar with it, but and I'm sure everybody's seen it as it's been on display here for the last few days. But it's just nice because al minute you can really just add, you know, a little bit of smoke to a dish, very little effort. So I'm gonna let that smoke sort of cool and as we start the other preparations of the dish. I'm gonna let that sit because I'm gonna portion it into smaller pieces for the final plate. So I have an array of different vegetables, and it was actually a company I was recently just introduced to at this conference, and it's just some pretty little incredible vegetables they have here. Some petite carrots and parsnip. I simply just want to risole and just some light butter, some blonde butter. I'm add salt. I'm just going to keep it fairly simple. Also, array of little spring, well, I guess it's not spring anymore, but little onions that you would typically find in spring, but these are apparently available all year. And we'll just start a light caramelization of those. I really love, you know, base flavors. I mean, something that's very classic is mirepoix, but taking it and utilizing newer ingredients that you can find, you know, like fennel too, which you would find just in a nice little beurre fondue. They're very aromatic vegetables, you know, and I believe it's something like simple as a braise, you know, and as classic as it is to do a braised matignon. You know, for me, they're flavors that really go well together. There's such a depth, and this is a good time of the year. We're getting into the fall, and this is where these flavors really relate to my style of cooking. I also have some matsutake mushrooms. I'm gonna start those in a light brown butter.
I've got mushrooms on my dish as well, and now the difference between his mushrooms and my mushrooms is, you know, I chose porcinis. I needed to incorporate that rye bread thing into my pastrami sandwich, and I do a dish in the last restaurant that I was the chef of. I'm unemployed, unfortunately, now, like most of the chefs in LA. And I made the rye bread. Basically, this is just a little wafer of porcini mushroom. I needed to find a mushroom that had a lot of flavor to do this. And basically, we just made it into a dough, rolled it out, steamed it, dried it, and you end up with a thin wafer of porcini mushroom. We used the porcini stock as well, reduced it, and a lot of the techniques that are out there today, a lot of chefs are practicing them, and they're learning how to do the techniques, but what they're forgetting to do is make them taste like something. So we really focus on trying to get the flavor and the stuff first before we actually move on to the techniques, and then once we get the flavors that we're looking for, then we sort of evolve it into something that's a bit more than just the flavor, and then we introduce the technique to it. So it's just a thin wafer. We're going to fry it at about 375 degrees Fahrenheit.
Sort of to expand on that thought, I chose matsutake because, you know, these pine. Sorry? You're not done?
I'm just kidding.
All right. I was trying to fill your dead space.
The last thing I'm going to do is just season it with a little bit of the flavors of rye bread. So we've got some dehydrated malt powder and a little bit of caraway seed that we're going to finish the outside of the cracker with.
Can I finish my thought? So I chose these mushrooms because they have, you know, real cinnamon sort of aromatic aroma to them. And, you know, thinking about long braises in this fall season, you know, I started thinking of really deep spices, you know, star anise and cinnamon and clove. and all of those things you associate with like long stews and long cooking and slow cooking. And that's the reason why I chose this mushroom. And because they're finally available towards the end of the season. So you have there your chip.
Now the next component to my dish is the Thousand Island dressing. Another partnership that Bryan and I have been fortunate to make, and Bryan and I just got back from a trip to Germany. We went to a laboratory and met with some scientists over there and got to work on some really interesting things. They're producing another line of sort of hydrocolloids and stuff like that are available. The thing about these products that are interesting is that they're taking a lot of the guesswork out of it. So it's actually accessible for the home cook and even into, maybe somebody here has a banquet facility that does 7,000 people a day and you don't have time to stand in a small laboratory style kitchen or whatever it is and do constant research and development. They've taken a lot of the guesswork out of it, and what we're doing with this company is developing recipes with dosing spoons, and actually this product here it hydrates a lot faster, so it's a lot more refined than some of the stuff that's on the market today. And this one is actually a powder, just says spuma on it, and we know that, I feel like I'm opening for the Beatles because I think right after us, Chef Albert Adria is going on, so I'm nervous to talk about this stuff in front of him. But spuma means foam. This is pretty easy to work with. It's a 1 or 2% ratio, meaning you add 1 gram to 100 grams of liquid. If you want to do something that has fat in it, and that's where this powder comes in handy. This has methicellulose, has maltodextrin, and it has xanthan gum in it, so it thickens, stabilizes, and emulsifies all at the same time. We can take a liquid and add 50% fat to it and still stabilize the entire thing, pour it in here, and have the espuma done in one shot. So basically what we've got here is just tomato water, the brine from capers. Uh-oh. So we've got equal parts. There's 150 grams of each here. 150 tomato water, 150 caper juice. And then we've got 300 grams of extra virgin olive oil. So you've got basically an equal ratio of fat to liquid. We're going to pour it in the blender. And because we're working with fat here, and again, this is this easy with these new products that we're bringing in. Where's the scaled out? This is very light. Now this only weighs, what do we have, 300? This weighs 6 grams, and it looks like a lot more than if any of you out there, I'm sure Chef Johnny's scaled out 6 grams of powder for cooking in his life. This has got maltodextrin cut into it, which lightens it up a lot. So, although it looks like a lot, it's really a lot less than you would normally use, and it's a lot lighter, and it hydrates a lot faster. Pour that in. You want to blend it on low speed? He's going to blend it on low speed. He's not going to incorporate too much air into it. But again, a lot of the things that are out there on the market today that do this type of thing or help you achieve this type of texture, when you add too much air to it, you can't actually work with it for a while. This hydrates twice as fast. It's actually more of an instant product. And again, it's going to be, Bryan and I are going to make this available. There's a website that we've partnered with called Culinary Imports, and you'll be able to get all of this stuff and access it as well. Bryan and I will help create videos and stuff like that. And again, it's a lot easier. If you don't have the time to develop this stuff, I think it's becoming a lot more mainstream. A lot more people can have access to it, and it's a lot easier to work with. Did you blend it? Bryan, what are you working on over there?
So, yeah, I'm all right. So another preparation we did for this dish is butternut squash. Just kind of keep it going into the theme of the fall. I made a sort of a terrine using butternut squash that uses agar-agar and also a little bit of gelatin. And I'm going to brulee that or caramelize it with just some raw sugar. It's sort of, after you've taken that whole butternut squash and split it in half, and you set it over some salt, you roast it in the oven really low, that great caramelization that you get over the top, sort of mimicking that into something that has a really soft texture in the finish. It's a little bit more refined because it's been pureed already, it's been passed through a tammy, it's been reset. But, so obviously for this style of cuisine, it'll work a little bit better on the palate. But then also just some regular puree that simply just took that same squash that we roasted and pureed it smooth. And that's going to be sort of the base of the plate. So I'm just rewarming that right now. Really nothing special as far as the technique is concerned, but The way that I looked at it was I wanted to recreate something that really rich roasted flavor you get that's caramelized. It's already been cooked like that, but we're just going to sort of enhance it again by adding the sugar. And it's using a blowtorch. We'll just caramelize the sugar over the top. And it's nice because you use the gelatin and the agar, it will actually keep set when it's warm. So you never have to fear using a torch on it. And you see it's nice and caramelized and it's become really aromatic and as the sugar starts to brown.
How did you incorporate the gelatin and the agar into the puree?
As far as ratio, the puree, after it was roasted, pureed past till it's smooth. I used like 0.85, 0.9% of total weight for the agar, and then incorporated in this batch I used, which is about 1.5 quart worth. I used about 1 sheet of gelatin.
You do it in a blender?
No, using a Vitamix. And well, first I have to make the puree, and then onto the stove, and just whisking it in. Bring the agar until it sets. It takes about 5 minutes to activate it, and once it's activated, then you simply just pour it, pass it again. I always pass it again onto a new tray. Just let it sit in the refrigerator until it's ready for service. So I'm simple, I'm almost there. Very good plate. Also, I have a few different other aromatics that were used in the braising process that I chose. Some really great coriander blossoms or berries. I'm going to take those and I'm actually going to add a few to the pan when I start to glaze the short rib right at the last, the cheek right at the last moment. And also a little rosemary, just little sprouts. Take the flowers, so we use these little buds. We go for the plate for presentation. But these are just extremely aromatic and really nice way to add just a fresh ingredient at the end for something that's really deep and rich, like a coriander spice that's been roasted or been a part of a braise for quite a long time. Cotton candy time?
So Bryan used a smoking gun earlier on his dish. We're going to use it as well. We've seen this tool around. Polyscience has it set up on their booth. Again, this is available at Wayne-Sonoma as well. This thing's great. I mean, you can carry it around if you're sitting in your bedroom and you're eating chips and salsa and all of a sudden you're getting bored of the salsa. You've got plastic wrap under your bed and a smoking gun. You pull it out, throw the plastic wrap over the salsa, light it up. I mean, you can take it anywhere. You can smoke in your living room, your backyard, on the subway here in New York. What we have here is now, the smoking gun. It's like, what else can you do with it? What else can you do with the cotton candy machine? What else can you do with all of these techniques and things that everybody's introducing? You continue to think about it, and you come here to get inspired. Bryan and I just went to a conference a few months ago, had nothing to do with food, but the theme of that conference was inspire. We walked out of there, and it was a huge, basically, conference for a retail company, and the whole message was inspire, and we walked out of there as chefs totally inspired just by the culture that they were creating, and I really think that's what you guys come here for, and that's what we've come here for in the past. So, very simple. A lot of chefs have been making cool things with cotton candy. A lot of chefs have been doing things with the smoking gun. Mix the two together and you can get a candied cloud of smoke that you can put on top of your dish. So we're just going to smoke the sugar, turn it into cotton candy, and then basically put a cloud of smoke right on top of the dish. And it's very simple. It's just, again, it's taking the techniques that are out there, thinking of something new with it, and just marrying the two together. So. You all right over there, chef?
I'm all right. How you doing?
I'm almost done.
Which smoke did you use?
Apple.
Apple? Oh.
I'm copying off of you.
Thank you. Copying is a good compliment. I like that. All right. Also, forgot about the celery element. So what I did is I took a little petite celery, blanched it lightly, and then dehydrated it just for a couple hours using a standard dehydrator. Just add a little crispness to the dish. But then also as well, I took onion, red onion, and blanched it lightly, and then sliced it thin, laid it out on acetate, and then also dehydrated that. It takes about 4 hours to do it on a vegetable setting. I like to take similar flavors and just add layers of texture of the same ingredient, using the onions and the carrots and the parsnip, sort of caramelizing those lightly in risole, but then using the celery in another textural aspect where it's going to be crispy. So just kind of building textures and flavors on the plate. Chef?
You gonna tell everybody what you're doing?
Yes.
You're gonna keep it a secret?
No. So first, I'm gonna start with the butternut squash puree. Just using a palette knife. Just gonna pull it across the plate. At this point, since the terrine was warmed up using the torch, it's relatively soft. Obviously, in a restaurant setting, plates are going to be extremely hot. There is a temperature balance that you need to maintain to make sure that this doesn't melt on you in order to get a very soft texture. Nice and straight. I just want to glaze the short rib. I'm sorry, I keep saying short ribs. Working with cheek. So I glaze this a little bit with the aromatics I placed in the pan.
Is that the braising liquid?
It is some of the braising liquid. After it's been, I had to do it separately because I saved the braising liquid and redo it for stage process.
Next part of my sandwich is the cheese. Basically, I just walked around and walked over to the Wisconsin cheese stand over there, grabbed the Gruyere that they had over there. Pastrami was Swiss on rye. Very simple, just not to show off like liquid nitrogen or anything like that. We've all seen it, but really just the strength of the Vitamix too. You know, very simple. Again, marry two things together. You have cheese, you have nitrogen, you have a blender, and make snow. Very simple. Take your cheese, add it to the nitrogen, freeze it. You can do it with cream cheese if you've got like a bagels and lox dish or something like that. Take the Philadelphia cheese, put it in nitrogen. This morning I did a demo next door where we did this with raw calamari. Then we dehydrated the snow and fried it, and I had a 100% protein cracker of calamari. Didn't have to add any stabilizers or anything to it. We just did it with 100% protein of the squid. So you could do that with shrimp. If you wanted to make like shrimp toast, chop up some shrimp, drop it in here, freeze it, blend it with the Vitamix, take your snow, sift it out onto a silpat, put it in the dehydrator for about 3 hours at 155 degrees Fahrenheit. Take it out, break it, fry it, and you've got like a chicharron of shrimp. I mean, there's a lot of things. You don't have to add a lot of stuff. A lot of natural ingredients can be manipulated with a little bit of technique and a little bit of imagination, and you can create things, you know, very simple without having to add too much to it. This cheese is great. It's got strong flavor, so for me, it's something that could stand up to like just taking it and making a snow out of it. You still want to find that strong flavor in the cheese. So I added nitrogen. I'm going to add a little bit more. You want to add it until it's like shards of glass basically inside, and then we're just going to blend it in the Vitamix until it comes out like snow.
Okay, over here I started placing some of the carrots on top of the terrine. That's where I'm going to use sort of as the base to display the vegetables that we use in the preparation of the dish. Some of the lightly caramelized or risoleed onions. And the fennel. Sort of lay one next to the terrine. And I also placed a few of the aromatics, the coriander berry I was talking about, and then also a few sprigs of the rosemary sporadically throughout the terrine, and as well some of the dehydrated celery. In the last moment, add a little more pinch of the fresh thyme blossoms or sprigs. It's more like a petite thyme. then 2 pieces of the cheek that I cut, and then just a couple of matsutake mushrooms. On the dish. Last component in my dish, just an onion straw. And there's my cheek. So it's Slow's braised Wagyu beef cheek, so butternut squash, and the flavors of mirepoix.
Awesome.
Thank you. Now, he's a tough chef to cook for, you know that, right?
Okay, Michael, what are you doing over here?
So we've got our gas streak and our tongue on the plate.
You counting down?
Yeah.
We've got our sauerkraut noodles.
Explain the noodles once again.
It's basically, we actually use maltodextrin and agar to stabilize it. And again, it's another one of those products that we've got available now, so you don't have to mix 2 ingredients anymore. You've got 2 already mixed together in a perfect ratio to use it. Basically, we just adopted, again, a technique that Chef Adria and Chef Albert and Chef Ferran created at El Bulli, where they were taking the siphon and squirting the noodles out of a long plastic tube. We're actually selling 2 little syringes now with the plastic tube for like $20, so you can kind of do it at home without, if you don't have, you know, an extra $125 to buy this. When we opened Bazaar, I worked with Chef Jose Andres, so I helped open that. I was the executive chef of that restaurant, and we didn't have a huge budget, you know, so we started trying to create ways where we could do things a little bit easier and have these tools available for all the cooks on the line so they could actually go out and make the investment themselves and have it a little bit cheaper way of doing it. So we took 2 syringes, heated the broth, pulled the liquid into the syringe, put the tube into a thing of ice water, shot it into it, took another syringe, shot it back out of the other side, and ended up with a noodle. The base, we just basically clarified some sauerkraut liquid. So we took sauerkraut juice, juiced it, took the brine from the sauerkraut as well, froze it with some gelatin, and then clarified it through a cheesecloth overnight. The next thing we're going to add is our rye bread, or our mushroom cracker. We've got some fresh little micro chives, and again, a lot of people, you know, you think the solution to an end of a dish for presentation is just take a handful of microgreens and throw it on top of your dish. We try and take flavors that actually make sense for the dish, and Fresh Origins has a lot of great product over there. We found that the micro chives had a lot of flavor, and the little seeds on there add a nice little bite to the dish, so we're going to add a few of those on there as well. And then to get some of that anise flavor in there, they've got these little fennel buds, which are full of flavor.
That plate's really cool. What kind of plate is that?
This is a new line from Mongatina, which is basically the factory's right outside of Barcelona. I think Steelite is the importer of that plate here in the US. I've been to the factory. They've got a really cool process over there, how they make the plates. They've got these presses, and you go in, and they actually take, you know, the design of the plate. It's not like, I mean, it's not handmade. The idea was handmade. But then they've got these huge machines that actually just like press the porcelain together, and you end up with this perfect plate.
It's cool.
And then we're going to add our cheese. So we've got our Swiss cheese. And then last, the smoke element for our pastrami sandwich. So we're just going to turn this back on, and we need smoke, Chef.
I think we need sugar. Where's your spoon?
I think they broke the cotton candy machine in the pastry contest this morning.
I got chef.
So, but once that gets heated up and the sugar comes out, we'll add the smoke element to the top of the dish. But that's basically my version of the Wagyu beef dish next to Brian's version of the Wagyu beef dish. So we've got that whole play on tongue-in-cheek. Mine inspired by a pastrami sandwich right here in New York City. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Antoinette, you have to have a question. I know you do.
We'll start with the audience first.
Okay.
Who's got a question in the audience?
My question is for Michael. Can you talk a little bit about the liquid nitrogen and about, I use it a lot and I'm aware of the safety concerns, and some people now that are trying to experiment with it and start right from the beginning for the first time. Can you talk a little bit about
Sure.
the safety issues of that?
Question is the safety issues of liquid nitrogen. It's the same safety issue of a deep fryer. You wouldn't go and hold your hand into a deep fryer for more than, I hope, at all. But if you happen to get a drip of it on your skin, it might beat up and burn you slightly. Liquid nitrogen is actually a lot more forgiving than that. The other issue is the cost factor. But if you think about how much one of those big drums of deep fat fryer oil costs, and I covered this morning in my class, it's $40 or $50 for one of those containers, where liquid nitrogen comes in a huge tank about this tall. You make an initial investment of $200 to $300 to buy the equipment that you need to attach to it, and then to maintain and keep it going in your kitchen, it's literally going to cost you like $150 to $200 a month, depending on usage. So
You had an issue with your thumb earlier this year,
I
right?
did get frostbite cooking against Rick Bayless in Aspen. We had a clock against us and stuff like that, and I did leave my finger in there too long. What happened was my nerves were sensitive, and they sort of got cut off, and I left it in there too long and ended up with frostbite. But that happened once ever. So
Either one of you guys, would you ever conceive being a chef without any other products that you use now? What would your life be like right now as a chef without the molecular stuff, you think?
both of us learned how to cook basics first. I got my first, it's funny, I was at the Julabo station over there the other day, and I saw all this fancy equipment that they had, and I actually bought my first circulator from them in 1999, 2000 rather, which is 10 years ago. But I didn't understand, and the reason I bought one was because I saw a French chef who was sharing the line with me. He was running a different restaurant, but two restaurants going on at the same time. He had worked at Ducasse for a long time and started sous vide cooking. So he braised, I'm over there braising short ribs and things like that, and he's cooking them sous vide, and I'm tasting the difference in texture. And I don't think if I didn't know how to braise something correctly, I would really understand why it would be better to cook it sous vide, or if in fact it is better, and so forth. So it's not that this is replacing any of it. This is just to accent the basics of cooking that we already have. And I think the trend of food now is sort of taking it and going in full circle. And I think you're going to see a lot more food coming back to the basics. One of the most innovative chefs in the country, if not the world, Grant Achatz in Chicago, is now doing dishes from the Escoffier age and finishing a lot of his meals with that. And I think it's to show the importance that, this is where we came from. That was innovative back when Escoffier created it, and we're not doing anything differently today. So,
what's the name of the products? What's the brand name, and when will it be available?
the people that are putting it together for us, it's called BioZoom. It's in Germany, and we actually, like I said, Bryan and I went to the lab, learned about it, worked with the scientists over there. It's actually a big, huge research and development lab for a lot of different things related to the food industry. For instance, when we were there last week, they were taking carrots and dehydrating them using sonar or something like that?
Yeah, they're using sonar to actually remove the liquid from the carrot to dehydrate them.
But it's
in a bath of water.
culinaryimports.com. I think it's culinary-imports.com. We're working on the website now, and again, we're working on the recipes as well. That is available to you right now, though. Back to your point earlier, you talked about tradition and basics of cooking. This morning in my class, we made tofu from the bean. And for me, that was something I just learned to do recently from a Japanese friend of mine, Chef Makoto. And we actually, in an hour, we made our own soy milk. We made our own tofu using the traditional clay pot, and we did it right there, within a matter of minutes. And again, for me, that was more inspiring than a lot of the stuff that we're doing today. It was the fact that from bean to tofu, you can actually do it, and understanding where the roots of it actually come from.
Up here. I was in your class this morning, and your tofu was fabulous. But the thing I thought about after your class this morning, you taught us many economical ways of using equipment that I previously hadn't thought about. Can you tell us more very cost-efficient ways of using different machines that you have, that you haven't talked about?
Cost-efficient ways?
Cost-efficient machines, like some of the things, like you said, with the syringes and making the noodles using that, and the smoking machine that you use today. What other types of very cheap machines that you can tell us about?
I think the most important machine is this one right here. That's probably the cheapest one you can buy. Aside from that, I mean, I don't know. What type of food do you cook, and what can you do to make your life a little bit easier? I mean, there's a lot of chefs today that are taking the microwave and doing things that it's unbelievable. You know, to take a carrot and vacuum pack it and cook it in the microwave, and in a minute have a perfectly cooked carrot. Now, maybe in your restaurant, you want to make something as simple as a Parmesan tuile. You can take a piece of porcelain or a plate, sprinkle Parmesan cheese on it, put it in the microwave, and zap that for, you know, a minute and 50 seconds. Open the door, and you've got a perfect Parmesan tuile. So there's, you know, you don't have to sit there over the nonstick pan anymore and pick it up and put it over the wine bottle like we all did when we did our apprenticeships. So, I mean, it's really anything. I mean, you can use anything is cost effective. It's how you use it.
I just want you to explain the process of the mushroom that you had on your dish.
Well, the first thing we did was we went to the basics, and that was flavor. So we took porcini mushrooms, cooked them in a porcini stock, reduced it. Once it was reduced, deglazed with more porcini stock, reduced it again, blended it with some starch, rolled it out, steamed it between 2 pieces of plastic wrap in the steamer, dried it at 180 degrees Fahrenheit, and then just broke it and deep fried it.
What kind of starch did you use?
This one was tapioca.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have to just say something about these two boys. So I called them at the 11th hour. All the presenters had long been asked. We had Michel Bras was giving us a final answer at the 11th hour a couple of weeks ago. And I called these boys and I said, Michel Bras is not coming. Can you put it together and come here in 2 weeks' time and come to the Congress? And they did a fabulous job. 2 workshops, a main stage demonstration, and they just flew in from Germany and put it all together. So thank you, chefs.
Thank you. Thank
We
you
got
for
to
having
open
us.
for Albert Adria and replace Michel Bras. I mean, I don't know what else you could ask for, so thank you.